Welcome to the Two Into You podcast, the show where we explore the difference between love that lifts you up and love that holds you back. We're your hosts, Madeline Campbell.
And I'm Mary Hayes.
In each episode, we'll unpack red flags, celebrate green flags, and help you spot when someone is too into you.
Run by Women's Aid, the Two Into You campaign helps young people recognise when affection and romance crosses the line. Together, we're here to give you the tools to navigate relationships with confidence. Before we kick off, remember, if you're worried about your own relationship or even a friend's relationship, you can call the Women's Aid 24-hour national Freephone helpline on 1-800-341-900 or use the chat service at twointoyou.ie. Both are free and completely confidential. Today, we're joined by Linda Smith, who is the head of the Women's Aid National Helpline Service, and Eavan Ward, who's the head of Women's Aid Regional Services. We'll be chatting about who can call the helpline or use the chat service, what people can expect when they call, what it's like to make a report, what it's like to go to the guards, and much, much more. Make sure you're following the Two Into You podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Like each episode, and please give us 5 stars. It helps us reach many more young people. Linda and Eavan, welcome to the Two Into You podcast. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Mary.
Thanks, Mary.
So just to kick off, we ask all our guests what their biggest relationship green flag is. So I'd love to hear yours.
And it's so great to be asked the question around green flags, because for so often in our work, we look at red flags. And I think for me, it's, I suppose, very simple, but not always easy to meet. And I think it is that the person you're in a relationship fundamentally builds you up and that you feel better in yourself and happier having been around them rather than the opposite.
Yeah, rather than drained and heavy. Yeah. And Linda?
And for me, I guess it would be 2 things. I suppose I'm thinking about longevity in a relationship. So it is about, obviously the things that Eavan has said, building up your self-esteem, having your back. But I think the ground roots of a really good relationship is respect for each other, support of each other. And I suppose your best cheerleader is your partner. They want you to succeed. They want you to do well. But, it is about equality as well and having an equal partnership in any relationship. So I think those 2, respect and equality, are really the kind of foundations of a really solid relationship. I
Absolutely.
think so.
So can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your role in Women's Aid and what it is you do?
Yep, I'm Eavan Ward and I have worked at Women's Aid for about 5 years and have been around the domestic violence sector for many more than that, coming close to 20, which is hard to believe. So as head of services, I manage a team who are providing frontline support services to women who are being subjected or have been subjected to domestic violence. So we have a number of different projects. Most of them are Dublin-based, but we have one of our services which is now almost national.
Brilliant. It'll be great to kind of go into more detail around what those services are, because Women's Aid provides so many services and I think people don't realise how much support is there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's great to have you here today to talk about those. Linda, can you tell us a little bit about your role?
Absolutely, Mary. I'm Linda Smith and I'm the head of the National Freephone Services. So, and like Eavan, I've been around for a long time in the domestic violence sector, but working in Women's Aid for the last 13 years. So in the sector over 20 years.
Wow.
But no, it's really very inspirational work. I love the work that we do and I love working for Women's Aid in particular. So with regards to the National Helpline Services, we offer the National Freephone Helpline and that's free for anyone to call. We also offer an IMSS service and email service and an SMS service.
So just in terms of the helpline and the services, who can access those support services? Because I think especially, around the Two Into You project, we're told often from young people that Women's Aid feels like something that's for, just older women who are in an abusive relationship. But I suppose with Two Into You, we're trying to, tell young people that these support services are there for you as well. So who can access the services?
Fundamentally, our services are open for anyone in a relationship that they're unsure. The very best place to start is to acknowledge something is not quite right and to be able to reach out to our National Freephone Helpline, which is 24/7, and also our IMSS, but we also have our email support service as well. You know, it is a busy service, I will say, and there might be a little wait time on a queue, but we're always there for anybody who is curious or, you know, concerned about what's going on in their relationship. And, you know, emails, I suppose, they're a great way of kind of putting on paper what you're thinking or what you're feeling. So it's a great sense of release as well if you're a bit ambiguous about speaking to someone, that you're afraid to maybe open up too much, or you just don't feel like you want to talk to a stranger. So there's, you know, the IMSS and the email service is a really good kind of way to open up the conversation without actually having to speak to somebody. We will always ultimately encourage somebody to try and reach out to the National Freephone Helpline simply because it's 24/7 and you don't need an appointment.
Very much like the helpline, all ages, all stages, all classes, all strata from society, all backgrounds represented in that. So we meet and support women from all walks of life and all stages. More and more, actually, we're seeing younger women who are in dating relationships or even very casual, maybe have had a couple of dates and are then experiencing stalking. Or being followed, or having this person showing up at their workplace, and then all the way through to women who are in long-term relationships. Please don't ever feel that you're wasting our time in coming.
It's important for me to also include family, friends, colleagues, you know, supporters already who are there for the person they suspect or maybe have been confided in. So there are supporters out there who are supporting people that they know who are in abusive relationships. So we're there for them as well, just to give them support.
Because, you know, often for people who are in an abusive relationship, they may never contact a service like Women's Aid or the Guards or tell someone, you know, that they feel like they're in an abusive relationship. So for a friend or family member to, you know, reach out to them to stay in their life, to contact Women's Aid can be really, really helpful and can be such a lifeline for people. So really important for people to know that those services are there for them as well. Something that we hear very often from young women is this idea of abuse having to be bad enough for them to seek support, or, you know, there being a lot of fear around taking up time from people who really need it. So they say, well, look, I'm not going to use the helpline or use the chat service because there's someone else who has it worse off than me. So I'd love to just hear you chat a bit about that. And I suppose also just to ask, like, are there young women calling the helpline? Is that a group that you hear from often?
If I could just say first off, we don't ask what your age is as a question. We just don't ask questions on the helpline just to say significantly, but we do, through the course of conversations, obviously some women may say, I'm only such and such an age and I don't expect my future to be like this. So, you know, we capture that information as it comes up. So we do get young women in dating relationships who are just starting off in relationships. But it's not unusual for all callers or contacts to feel that if there's not physical abuse, that they're wasting our time or they're taking up valuable time that somebody else could do with receiving the support. So it's very regular, very often that we hear that. But what we do is, you're here now, you picked up the phone, you reached out, you made contact, and we're here for you right now. So we're not rushing this space. The majority of disclosures that we hear from women are emotional abuse. So, I mean, I think from that perspective, women tend to feel that because it's emotional abuse, they do minimize it. It's only name calling, you know, it that didn't really hurt. You know, it's not physical abuse, but emotional abuse has way long lasting effects on women, far beyond what we can realise ourselves. So where women do say themselves, at least with broken bones, they will mend.
Yeah.
And even that to hear is really difficult. Women lose themselves, their own sense of self and their individuality, that they become nearly just a shell of themselves. And we've often heard that as well.
And as well, I think that minimizing is, it really does kind of mirror the type of language and the messages that they will get from an abusive partner, that, you're making this out to be worse than it is, that, other people have it way worse than you don't have it that bad. So really kind of reiterating that gaslighting that is so common.
It's so important. And even just that piece of validation around, well, no, actually, what you're describing is abuse. You're not imagining it. It just sounds quite serious. Can be a really important first step in looking at, okay, I've received that validation and now I want to know what are my options and what's available to me. So it's really important.
Yeah, so important. It's interesting as well to hear that emotional abuse is the most common thing that you hear, because, as we know with our research from 2&2U, is that emotional abuse is the most common form of abuse for young women. What are the kind of specific things that you would hear from young women contacting the helpline and using the chat service?
I think emotional abuse really is kind of classed as like verbal abuse, putting you down, name calling you, belittling you, the things that you do, an attack on you as an individual, leading you to doubt yourself. And you did mention the gaslighting there. So, if that happens to you often enough, and then on a day-to-day basis, you do second guess yourself all of the time. And the problem with the second guessing is, that emotional abuse attacks your thinking, your rational thinking. So I suppose with younger women who experience abuse, there might be a level of relationship experience. So if it's a first time relationship, is this the norm? I've nothing to benchmark it against. Maybe he is, under pressure, or, he's not getting on with his family. They possibly will take on board what excuses are being given to them by their abuser. So after a period of time, I guess, when that relationship particularly becomes more committed, over a period of time, that it'll become more intense, I suppose, the verbal abuse or the emotional abuse.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think as well, Mary, so in terms of, as you're talking there, Linda, in terms of clients who are meeting, or younger women we're meeting face to face, some are obviously in what we would call dating relationships. And we can see kind of very clearly play out, I suppose, what we're seeing in broader society around gender roles, these traditional views that younger men hold around viewing their girlfriend or their partner as a possession, her not being allowed, in inverted commas, to go out without him, or to have friends, or to have a life outside, or without his permission. But then we're also supporting women who are parents, young women who are parents, who have had children, who may still be in the relationship or who are post-relationship. And again, those gender stereotypes play out, and almost seeing, because the woman is now a mother of his child, that she is somehow answerable for every single decision she makes. And then, of course, the more insidious, which we see in all age groups, is using kind of post-separation, and particularly using the family courts and using their child or children as a means to continue abuse post-separation. So they're all factors as well.
Yeah. And, one thing that I hear as well from young women who are mothers is this kind of idea that, well, it's better to stay in the relationship for the kids. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I know actually, there's a lot of science behind the fact that, this is actually very harmful to kids, and also to women who are pregnant, even before a child is born, that, abuse can be harmful.
And again, this is such a dilemma the women we support face, because it kind of can be a situation, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. We know, research shows us, we see it every day, we hear it from women through our frontline services, through our helpline. We know that children are victims of domestic abuse. They're not mere bystanders. They're not mere witnesses. They too are subjected to abuse in their homes, and we know the devastating impact that has on them. Even when in the womb, studies show us that the growth can be impacted. There can be preterm health issues, pre-birth health issues, smaller weight in babies, difficulty feeding. And I suppose for obvious reasons, if their mum is being subjected to abuse and ongoing physical and emotional abuse, the impact that may have on a growing baby. But we also know how damn hard it is to leave a relationship. And I think that's something that when you're maybe not in this work and not working in the sector and seeing, it can be a bit of a throwaway comment. Well, why doesn't she just leave? If I were her, I wouldn't stay. And she needs to protect her kids. And I suppose I can definitely say, after the many, many years I've been in the work, is trying to do what's best for her children is generally at the very forefront of a mother and a woman's mind, trying to keep the family together. And again, it's really complex, and society does tell us that you need to be part of the nuclear family with, mom and dad and 2 kids and white picket fence. And society still does tell us that is what we should be kind of striving towards and what we should be keeping together, and trying to kind of break away for so many different reasons, not least, financial, housing, knowing what's going to happen when you're in an abusive relationship and how that can be used against you if you try to leave. It can just be so difficult. I think it's really important as agencies that we're there from the beginning to present options and to present, this is what you can do should you wish to stay or should you wish to leave. And I know that's really, it's what women need as well, because we're always supporting women who aren't looking to leave a relationship. They're looking for support to try to cope a little bit better and to make a plan for their future.
That's so interesting that you bring that up around, why don't they just leave? Because I think often, that is a fear amongst like young women in particular, that, well, if they contact Women's Aid, if they use the chat service on 2into, that, they'll just be told, well, you should just leave, that this is an abusive relationship, you should just break up. And especially when you're young, you might not want to break up. This could be somebody that you really, really love and care about, and that you think, well, if we could just get back to the way that it was before, that's why it's so important for young women in particular to understand that, the helpline and the services, they're there as a starting place, just for you to be heard. That's the reason why we wanted to have both of you on, was to kind of just demystify everything, to show you that actually this isn't, while this can be very frightening to go through abuse, and it can be an intimidating thing maybe to go to a service or to make a report, we want you to know that actually, these are spaces where you will just be listened to and believed and supported around whatever stage it is you're at. Linda, just to ask you then in particular, imagine there's a young girl out there and she wants to contact the helpline. From the second, say, she picks up the phone and somebody else answers it, what can she expect? What are the kind of things that she'll be asked or maybe will be said?
There's 2 fundamental things, just following on from what Eavan has said, that's really important, I think, for people to understand. And that is, where there's abuse, there's also been love. So, we can't neglect that that person has feelings for the person who should be looking after them, but actually is abusing them. So we do talk about that. It's okay. It's not a taboo subject. We need to be able to kind of get a balance of, look, it's understanding that you do feel conflict, because, aside from, the experiences that I have that are very negative, they're negatively impacting on you, there's also been good times and bad times. So we do need to start off, from a page that speaks reality. And that is the reality. There is love there. Obviously, if, there was abuse from day one, there'd be no relationship, so you do have to be realistic. And the other point that's really important to make from anybody who is, thinking to reach out to our services, but not just our support services, any service that's there, is the fact that they're the expert. So they're the two fundamental pieces, I think, from our perspective, that when we meet anyone who reaches out for support, is that we're not the experts. Yes, we have expertise in the knowledge and the understanding and dynamics of abuse. We can share our knowledge, and we do that very sensitively. But they are the expert in that relationship. So it's not coming up first and foremost with a solution. It is to understand, what the needs of that person is. And I suppose, when they reach out to the helpline, we don't sit with an assessment sheet of paper asking you your name, where you live, your date of birth, have you got children in the family. It's very much a space, and I would always call it a sacred space for anyone who wishes to avail of that space to bring whatever it is they need.
Yeah.
So whatever's worrying them, they don't need to have a script themselves, because they could be very emotionally distressed. They could feel that this is the moment in time now that I'm going to pick up the phone, I'm going to do it, I have the courage. We don't have an anticipation of how someone's going to present to us.
Yeah.
So however that person decides to present, and that's what we meet.
And I think as well, Mary, I think we're very, always very mindful as well that, when a woman is coming to us for support, she may not trust her own judgment. She may not trust her own instincts. And that really can be from being in a relationship where you're constantly put down.
Yeah.
You're constantly told you're useless, you're fat, you're ugly, you're crazy, who's going to believe you, kind of to the forefront of our minds in terms of supporting is around, we're not going to judge, we're not going to tell you, you need to do this. And sometimes women ask us, what do you think I should do? And it's always about, going back to Linda's point, it's around women are surviving these situations. Women are getting on with their lives, they're raising their kids, they're going to work. And it's around kind of harnessing that and never around putting a woman in a position where she feels, oh, well, I have to do what they tell me now. Somebody else in my life to tell me what to do. So we're always really mindful in how we approach that support, that we're coming from a place of we're empowering, we're giving you information with a view to you then making a decision of how best you want to use that with no pressure.
Yeah. And that's actually what I was going to say, is my real understanding of the helpline and the services is that they are empowering the person, the woman, that you deserve this space and that it's on your terms, like what happens next. So, often we'll hear from girls like, well, I called the helpline, then what happens? Yeah. And it's kind of, that it's like, well, you deserve to make that decision. No one can tell you. So it's again about meeting that person where they're at.
I think one of the things that women do say to us, or callers say to us, is that we get it.
Yeah.
I don't have to explain it to you. She might just explain a few things that have come up, but then through shared knowledge, we meet in a space that, there's mutual mindsets around understanding that this is really happening and this is a real issue.
Yeah. And Eavan, you spoke as well about, an appointment. So Women's Aid offers one-to-one support services. So can you just explain a little bit about what that entails?
So generally our kind of the gateway to our services through the helpline. So if it's, through the course of a helpline call, it's kind of established that maybe this caller would benefit from more ongoing support or in-person support. It's established where she is in the country. If she's in Dublin, she can be referred to our outreach service. If she's outside Dublin, she can be referred to a more local service to her in her town or her community. Through the helpline, she can be connected directly with the service of her choice. For our own outreach service, so a caller will be directed to our own admin line, where she will leave a message and will then be contacted by our administrator, who will take her details and will book her into one of our appointments. So we have a number of different outreach locations throughout the city, kind of north, south side, county and city. And we will meet women. We've kind of weekly set times where we'll meet women. And we also will meet women outside of those. If those times don't work, we'll meet women before work or after work or during their lunch break. And generally, we don't operate huge waiting lists. So within a couple of weeks, you'll have an appointment with an outreach worker. And that person will meet you then face to face, or again, you can choose a phone consult if you prefer. And if English is not your first language, or you just feel more comfortable speaking in your own native tongue, we can also arrange for interpreters to meet, to be at that appointment to support you. And generally, we'll schedule appointments for an hour. So you'll meet with an outreach worker one-to-one, face-to-face for an hour to kind of go through whatever it is you need to go through. And an important kind of first part of that will also be looking at safety planning. I suppose it's always kind of the basis of the support work that we do is looking at safety. We're constantly kind of analysing risk and looking at factors that may increase risk at a certain time. Then in terms of our other frontline services, we have a drop-in service in the Dolphin House Family Law Court. Well, this is the District Court for Family Law, and it's where you go to make an application for a domestic violence order or any family law matters. So we have a full-time drop-in service based there, and it's no appointment necessary. You go to the 4th floor in the court, and we're there again to meet whatever need comes in. And generally it's around women are looking for information. Am I entitled to apply for an order? How do I apply for an order? What do I need to do? What are the steps? What will happen once I make my application? What do I need to do after? Where do I need to be referred? So I suppose it's like a one-stop shop that will help and guide women around that process. And very often for that drop-in service, it's the very first time that a woman is looking to engage with specialist support.
Yeah. So say someone is outside of Dublin who can't access that in-person service. Is that something, around getting information around, protection orders, barring orders? Is that something that they can get, through the helpline or the one-to-one services, or how can they seek that information?
Yeah. So the drop-in service, it's the only one in Dublin. There are other drop-ins kind of throughout the country, but any of the specialised domestic violence support services around Ireland would be really familiar with court processes and would do a lot of accompaniment to court. It's kind of part and parcel of the work. So they would be a huge resource if anybody's looking for information around their local court and times and dates and stuff, because they don't sit every day around the country as well.
Yeah.
And just to say that obviously the National Freephone Helpline does have a national directory, and it, again, as we don't ask questions, if that issue comes up from a practical point of view that someone is thinking about applying for an order, we will ask what county they're in, just to give them information about their local district court, and information about the process in which they can expect the application, give information about the types of orders and so on. So, yeah.
And really important as well to say now that the law in Ireland says that you don't have to be living with a partner to seek legal protection from them, and that there is information on the 2 and 2 website around what legal protections are available. But, we always say to contact the helpline or the chat service as a kind of a gateway to further information, because especially when you're young, this can seem like such an intimidating process to go down, especially if you haven't told your parents, your family, if you're the only one who knows about this, it can be really, really frightening. And actually on that, one of the things that is kind of out there and is said all the time is that, well, if you go to the guards, nothing will happen, or that I don't have enough evidence, or I don't know what to say, I don't know, who to go to when I go into the Garda station. The whole thing just seems absolutely terrifying. And say if you're, an 18-year-old girl down in Tipperary, what happens? So can you talk to us just a little bit about what it's like to make a report to the guards?
Yeah, for all ages, going to a Garda station for the first time, walking in, and kind of not knowing what to expect is hugely daunting and really scary. And it is something that we would, offer to do, is to accompany a woman to a Garda station to make a statement, or to make an initial report. But generally, I suppose, if a member of the public, a woman is walking into a Garda station, her first point of contact with the guard will be at reception. So will be at a hatch or will be at a desk. Now, we would always encourage as well that a woman going into a station can ask if she can speak to somebody in private, can ask if preferred, if she could speak to a female officer or a female Garda. Some of the bigger Garda stations also have what are called DACT teams, or domestic abuse coordination teams, within their stations. And members of the public can also ask to be linked in with that particular officer as well. But I suppose in terms of, there is definitely no uniform. You will definitely get this response when you go in. And unfortunately, it can be person specific, and it can be just a particular day. One particular, Garda station office can be extremely busy. So I think not to underestimate that it can be quite a difficult process to go in and make a first step. So we would really encourage that, obviously we know like domestic violence is a crime. It needs to be reported to the guards, and you will be met, with guards who are willing and able to respond and do respond. But sometimes just having that bit of extra support and moral support and accompaniment can really make a difference as well.
Yeah, absolutely. But even to know, that you can ask to speak to a female guard, that you can ask to speak to someone in private, like that alone, I think is really, really helpful for people to know. As well, I think there's an assumption that like you have to have like loads of evidence and screenshots and all this kind of stuff. And again, I know it's hard to answer, but is there anything maybe that you would encourage people to do, maybe who think they might be in an abusive relationship and are trying to like gather a little bit of evidence for themselves if they then decide to make a report? Are there things that they could do that could help them?
Yeah, we know now so much abuse, so much communication and so much abuse happens through our phones, be that, WhatsApp messages, voice notes, social media. And I think particularly, but not exclusively, but particularly in dating relationships, a lot of abuse can happen via social media platforms. So it's really important that if this is happening, that you're taking screenshots, you're saving, you're downloading, keeping them in a file, not deleting. This is something you may not think of, but if they're not in English or in a foreign language, they may need to be interpreted or translated for a future date. And again, that's something support services can kind of direct you and steer you with. Really also important is to keep a record of particular incidents, and again, to do it in a way that it's as safe as possible. So, we're not suggesting that you leave notebooks lying around which could be found, but to keep a record of particular incidents, if there have been any particularly significant or even not significant, but particular incidents of verbal abuse or issues where obviously if there's physical abuse and you are left with injuries, that there's photographs of those. And again, surprisingly, or not, maybe not so much, how often women will present to their GP or will even present to hospital, but will not actually say what happened. And, this is where we're kind of calling out to health professionals as well to be vigilant and to ensure that there are photographs taken of injuries. To keep note as well, like, you're trying to think of all different forms of abuse, but, particularly economic abuse as well, that you're keeping note maybe of bank accounts, credit card statements, where you can show, maybe access or not, or lack of access to finances. Particularly more long-standing relationships. So I suppose anything that can kind of show a pattern, because when you're trying to, particularly around coercive control or emotional abuse, you're trying to establish a pattern of behaviour. So pattern is generally over a period of time. So anything that you can kind of show where there's incidents or where there's patterns of behaviour over a period of time, that you can save those and that you're keeping them in a way that's safe and that doesn't kind of put you under any more risk.
Yeah. So one girl I'd heard had a notebook in her friend's house.
Yeah.
And if anything happened, she would write it down almost immediately, because she knew that, as time went on, that her partner and she then would convince herself that what happened wasn't as big of a deal as it was. So, her friend knew what she was writing in this, and she found it very hard to kind of, keep this notebook for her because she was so concerned about her, but she knew, okay, this is what I need to do for her, that it's in a safe place so that then if she needs it at a certain point, that it's there. And also it was really helpful for her as well to remember, actually, when this happened, this was serious,
And women will also contact us via their work email, or use work to maybe store that notebook, or work can be a safe place in terms of kind of keeping that evidence as well, if there is that risk of somebody else finding it at all.
Yeah. So we've talked a little bit as well about, the fear of not being believed, or like it's not good enough. So what would you say to anyone who is worried about not being believed? And do you have a message of hope for anyone listening that's maybe recognising some things we've talked about?
Well, what I would say is, if you are contemplating picking up the phone or contacting us through email or IMSS, there is no judgment. And I can tell you now that, we've got such expertise on our frontline services that there's absolutely, unfortunately, nothing that they have not heard already. So it is about just using the space without feeling that what you might say, there's going to be a judgment to follow, because that will never happen on the helpline or on any of the services that we offer, because we know how difficult it is for people to reach out. It might be the first and only time that somebody has this opportunity or the courage to actually make this first step. So we most certainly do not want to jeopardise that. And we want to make sure that that person has the safest possible space in order to begin to build themselves back up again.
And I think it's really important as well to remember, like, it is possible to come out the other end. And we see that every day as well. Women will tell us, I've moved on, I'm now in a different stage of my life. And, while that part of my life was horrendous, with support, be that from a specialist domestic violence service or through family and friends and colleagues, women do come out the other end. Women of all ages come out the other end. Even women in their 80s come out the other end and decide, I want something different for myself and I'm going to take steps.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you, first of all, for coming on the podcast, but also thank you for all the incredible work that you do. Because I know from, in particular, the young women that, we speak to at 2 and 2, that so many of them have said that, the helpline and the support services have been an absolute lifeline for them. And for many of them, it was that kind of first place where they felt validated and believed. And many of them now have, been able to find that hope and to be able to move forward and have found, brighter futures. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Mary. Thank you.
So now we're joined by Madeline Campbell, our 2 and 2 officer. There was a lot of information in that episode. Madeline, what did you think?
I think this episode really brings to light how overwhelming it can be to seek support, because you might be in an abusive relationship and you might not know that you're in an abusive relationship. You might not know what you need to leave or to make yourself feel more safe. You might not know where to go. And that can be so overwhelming and so frightening. And so to anyone who's feeling that, I think if we can just remind them that the services are there to support you, they're there to listen to you, and they're there to believe you. And whether it's picking up the phone and just saying, hey, something feels kind of wrong, I just want to check in. Or if you're in crisis, they're there for you. So whatever you need, those services are available. But it doesn't necessarily have to start with calling the helpline. It can start with taking the quiz on 2 and 2. Or it can start with talking to a friend that you really trust, or your mom or your sister or your cousin or someone in your class that you really trust. It doesn't have to look a certain way, and your response is right.
Even thinking about, like, do we break up? Does this have to be the end of the relationship? Are things bad enough? Am I taking up space from someone else? There's so much that we're told, and so many messages of like shame and, you don't deserve this. But the services are there to kind of just give you a bit more insight.
Yes.
Because maybe you have talked to friends or family, and maybe they have played it down or said, well, maybe things will get better, but something still feels a little bit wrong. Like, that's why the services are there for you. And they can help you figure out what your next stage is, whether it's figuring out, do we break up? How do I talk to them about this? How do I talk to my family about this? What do I do if I'm worried how this will impact us living together or my financial situation? All those kind of things. And as well, all around like the fear of like reporting and going to the guards, all that rhetoric that we constantly hear of like, well, the guards won't do anything. You won't be believed. You need all this evidence. That's not for anyone to decipher for you. That's for you to figure out what your situation is and actually what you need to feel safe, because you deserve safety and you deserve support. You deserve to have someone to hear you and to hear your concerns and to work out with you what's right for you and what can help you feel safe and supported.
Exactly.
So, for example, one girl said, I never heard of Women's Aid and wish I had sooner. I knew what he was doing was wrong, but I couldn't stay away. He had isolated me from all my family and my friends, and I felt like I had nothing left but him. That's 4 years ago, and after years of therapy and countless reflections, I finally have my voice back and I'm ready to use it. So, like, we can see there that, contacting the helpline can be helpful, and it can be really validating.
Absolutely. This person said, I just wanted to say thank you so much for all you're doing. Starting with Juliana's video, 2 and 2 gave me the vocabulary I needed to fully understand and share what happened to me. I always knew I had been abused in my relationship deep down, but 2 and 2 made me feel so validated and believed. Thank you all so much.
That's so beautiful, and it gives us so much hope. Sometimes I think we forget that this is reaching people and it is helping them and giving them hope for the future.
Yeah, and it's so nice to be able to hear directly from survivors that they've gone through this and there is life after abuse and they found this support, and you can too.
Remember, we're always here for you. Whatever your question might be, we're here to help at 2intoyou.ie.
And if you're worried about your own relationship or even a friend's relationship, you can call the Women's Aid 24-hour national Freephone helpline on 1-800-341-900 or use the chat service at 2intoyou.ie. Both are free and completely confidential.
Thank you so much for listening. Make sure you follow the 2 Into You podcast wherever you get your podcasts. A new episode drops the first Monday of every month. See you next time.